Hi, so today I'm going to be presenting to you a presentation about the polar day and the polar night. And this is basically a phenomena that you experience in the northern hemisphere. So I got some pictures of the polar night for you to start off with, and I have some pictures of the polar day. So as you can see, these are both extremes. One of them is characterized by the absence of light, and one's characterized by the abundance of light. But what exactly are these, and what causes them? So before we begin, I wanted to go ahead and tell you a little about myself and just say that I have been in Sweden for about 1 year. And so I have had plenty of time to experience both of these phenomena. They are approximately about 6 months each, but that isn't to say that it's as bad in the first slides all year. So they're usually just maybe 1 or 2 months that are actually as bad as the first couple pictures. They're usually kind of a mix of each, so it isn't too bad. Anyway, today I wanted to explain the objectives of the fact that I'll go over the polar day and the polar night. Then I wanted to talk about how they affect you and how they affect the environment, and then what causes them. Let's go. So what is a polar day? A polar day is coined the midnight sun, and it is basically an abundance of sunlight. So it's bright and sunny all day, just like summer. And these levels vary depending on the time of year. When does a polar day occur then? So a polar day is usually in summer. It's on December 21st as it's connected, or sorry, June 21st as it is connected to the summer solstice. How does a polar day affect you? So a polar day messes with the chemical in your brain that it produces called melatonin. And melatonin basically tells you when to fall asleep. But with the extra sunlight that blocks your brain from producing that chemical, it is very hard for you to go to sleep. And it basically tells you to be energized and you want to be up all day. So in order to counteract that, take melatonin and get some blackout curtains to prevent that. So how does the polar day affect the environment? So the polar day really helps the environment boom in many ways. Because the plant life has double the time or double the sunlight to grow, it basically just, it's so beautiful over there. Everything grows at like twice the rate it does here in the States. And then there's also an increased animal activity and insect activity just because of all this extra sunlight and all this extra abundance of sunlight. There's also lots of droughts and fires that happen in the forests in Sweden during this time just because it gets so hot and there is so much sunlight. Up next, so I want to go ahead and ask you to take a minute, pause your screens, and what do you think is going to be next? Okay, polar night. So the polar night is characterized by a lack of sunlight. It is basically continuous darkness all day. It's very bleak and depressing, but the levers differ on what time of year it is. So what time of year would all this happen on? Well, it generally occurs in winter. It's connected to the Earth's winter solstice, which is usually on December 21st. So that is the darkest day of the year. How does polar night affect you? Well, it kind of does the opposite of a polar day. So basically a polar night makes your brain produce too much melatonin. So you're basically tired and unmotivated all day. So you want to go ahead and take a vitamin D to help prevent this, and you want to get outside and exercise and just get as much sunlight and activity as you can so you feel like you're having a normal day. So how does this affect the environment? Well, because there's snow everywhere, usually when during the time of a polar night, it is makes for very cold. It's very cold atmosphere, so there's almost no snow, almost no plants, and no growth or anything. It's very quiet because everybody's hunkered down inside their rooms or whatnot. But a blanket of snow does really help illuminate the whole place because the sunlight, the little light there is, it reflects off the snow. So it's not too bad if that happens. So up next, I want to talk about what the polar nights are caused by. So the polar nights are basically caused by a rotation in the Earth on the axis, and then it is also caused by revolving around the sun. So I have a diagram on here that tells you a little bit about it. And so just imagine the Earth the picture was bigger and the Earth could go all the way around the sun. That'd basically be the cycle for you. And then this graph here is basically focused on northern Sweden, and it basically just tells you it's a graph of the amount of sunlight versus the amount of darkness. And so the camera little thing up here is blocking it, but there's about 52 days of sunlight versus 32 days of darkness. So it isn't quite equal, but it's pretty close. So now you know. Now you know what the polar nights are. Now you know what causes them, and now you know their effects. So I wanted to go ahead and ask you to take a moment, ask yourself, would you want to experience something as extreme as a polar day or a polar night? So are you ready then to experience this like right now? And if so, like how long would you want to go over and experience something like this? Thank you.